Joining us now here on the Rich Eisen Show, getting us ready to go over the brackets for the 2023 March Madness men's basketball tournament that begins this very week. CBS and Turner, The Athletic, and he is co-author of a book with Sister Jean. Seth Davis joining us here on the Rich Eisen Show. How you doing, Seth?
Doing all right, Rich. Little running on fumes this morning, but I'll recharge my batteries in time for tomorrow night. I don't understand the point of having an NCAA tournament without Michigan in it, but maybe another conversation.
You know what? I think it got canceled, right? And then they just put it back on just because so many other people complained about it.
That would be the appropriate response.
Understood. So let's just jump right into it. Do you like the brackets, or are there any issues with the brackets in your mind, Seth?
Yeah. I mean, allowing that these committee folks spend a lot more time on this than I do. I said during the selection show, I don't see any justification, frankly, for putting Houston over Kansas in the overall seed line. I'm not sure, because people actually have normal lives and they don't live this like I do, but I'm not sure how many people know. They actually seed the entire field 1 through 68, and people think there's an S curve where you're matching up seeds in that way, but it's all determined by geography. So if you are Kansas and you are the number 2 overall seed, you get to go to the Midwest Regional, which is being decided in Kansas City. So now Houston is going there, and Kansas is being sent out west. I mean, Kansas had twice the number of Quad 1 wins, the hardest strength of schedule in the whole country. Houston was 96, and Houston had a bad loss to Temple. So, I mean, Houston's good, clearly deserved to be a 1 seed, but that was really the one thing that jumped out at me. Everything else, like if you're a bubble team, I know Rutgers fans are bummed, and Oklahoma State, what have you, but if you've played your way onto the bubble, then you really have nothing to complain about at this point.
Well, I mean, if you're a Rutgers fan, you just root for Fairleigh Dickinson in the first 4, right, Seth?
Jersey.
Come on now. I mean, it's not like Jersey got completely shut out here. And then there's Princeton. I don't know why. Maybe it's my old school backdoor Pete Carrill type guy, but I see Princeton versus Arizona, and I just start to wonder to myself, is that an upset? Start identifying some of the shockers, the slipper fits type moments that we're going to see on Thursday and Friday of this week.
So just some nerdy numbers for you. 6 of the last 10 years, a 15 has defeated a 2. So if you pick a 15 over a 2, then ostensibly you have a 60% chance of winning. At least, one of them. So, Arizona, they're the last number 2 seed, so that might be where you look. They've got an injury issue with their point guard. They played UCLA in the Pac-12 final, and UCLA had 2 guys out. One of them was not coming back, and Arizona still only beat them by 2. So that was a little bit surprising to me. But, staying in that bracket, Rich, the 2 teams I like there in the South are Charleston and Furman. Virginia's another one with an injury issue. Charleston, at one point was ranked in the top 25. I think they're very underseeded at a 12, and I love the way they match up with San Diego State. So those are 2 to jump on. I actually have UCSB. Baylor's been vulnerable, and then Florida Atlantic to me is an interesting team, which also won a ton of games. Has also been ranked in the top 25. They play a lot of players. So that one comes to mind. And the other 2 I'll give you, I really like VCU over St. Mary's. VCU had a great home stretch last month and a half of the season, won the A-10 tournament. Terrific defensive team, as is St. Mary's. So that's why I think it's a good matchup. And, of course, we got to love the Drake, which is one of the oldest teams in the country and a really good bucket getter. And Tucker DeVries, the Missouri Valley, has a great history, and they were the best team. They won their conference championship game by 26 points. So I've got them actually beating Indiana in the second round to go to the Sweet 16.
How about that? Man.
But I'll tell you this, Rich.
Yes, sir.
All these teams from 11 to 14, they can all play. I'm telling you, they can all play.
That's what Absolutely. I guess. Yeah, and I guess that's what we've seen over the last couple of years. And I'm just wondering, why, or if it's now a deeper pool, or we never talk about college basketball when it comes to NIL, Seth. We always focus on the college football world, but I'm wondering if we might see a time, and this year could be it, if we just see more of the upsets from the double-digit seeds because they get 1 or 2 or 3 kids that are terrific that we might hear about, say, heaven forbid, in a June draft in the NBA, that they're going to the smaller schools, and now suddenly there's parity, if you will, for an NCAA tournament?
Yeah, it's a great point, but I think it's been happening for a long time. I mean, I think if you look back really over those last 20 years, starting with the George Mason going to the Final Four, the very first year we had the first four. I want to say it was 2012, maybe 2014.
Mm-hmm.
The very first year from the first four, VCU was in it. They went all the way to the Final Four, and then UCLA did that in 21. So in 9 years, we've had two teams go from the first four to the Final Four. So you're talking about the last teams in the field. Florida Gulf Coast was the first to reach a Sweet 16. St. Peter's last year was the first 15 seed to reach an Elite Eight. So Wichita State, Butler. So it's been happening for quite some time. One thing that is happening, though, because you mentioned NIL, between the NIL and the transfer portal,
mm-hmm.
where kids can now switch schools and not have to sit out. And the other thing, Rich, is the COVID years. Everybody got an extra eligibility, so we've got like 60-year seniors on some of these teams. So college basketball is definitely older than it's ever been until this COVID thing cycles out, and I think that's kind of what I look for, not only experience but also continuity, who's retaining players over a couple of years, and oftentimes it is the mid-majors who are able to do that a little bit more easily.
Seth Davis here from CBS Sports Turner, the Athletic, on the Rich Eisen Show, as the brackets have now come out, and the first four starts on Tuesday, and then do we call it the first round on Thursday? Have we finally given up the ghost of calling that the second round? That's long gone, right, Seth?
Can you believe someone had that idea? Yeah, that was like, you know what? They didn't like the play-in game. So first it used to be only one of these games. That was the play-in game. Well, let's call it an opening round game. Okay, but now it's a first-round game, and then the big first round is the second round, and that messed everything up.
Right.
So sometimes it takes them a little while to get to the right spot, but I think they got there.
We're finally there. So just a couple more questions on the sport writ large. Did Jim Boeheim get fired, Seth?
Kind of, yeah. I think he was moving to a place where he was going to retire, and then because he's Jim Boeheim, God bless him, he's a reporter's dream because he always says something he shouldn't say. He just couldn't help himself in that press conference. Well, it's up to the school, and then okay, So sometimes if you force someone to show their hand, they show you their hand, and in this case, he got the back of the hand. So I think he saw the writing on the wall of, well, if I want to come back next year, I think I can, but maybe there's some folks who don't want me to because we haven't done well the last couple of years, and I'm 77, whatever he is. So I think they would have gotten there in a better way, but he just wouldn't play nice in the sandbox, and they were working things out. Some of it, the chancellor was out of town. I talked to Jimmy for a while about all this, but yeah, I think at the end of the day, they expedited the denouement, I think is maybe a more politic way to say it, but if you want to say he got fired, it's not entirely incorrect.
Well, I guess the only reason why I bring it up is because of that final press conference and how odd, there's no other way to put it, odd, awkward, which is not what you want to have from somebody who's been part of the program since 1969. So does he have a role in Syracuse basketball if he wants it, or is this just let's just have a cooling off period because of the way everything ended? What do you think?
I think he'll have a role. I mean, like I said, I think it was messy. I think they would have ended up there anyway. They were starting to have conversations. Okay, how's this going to look? One of the issues was he's got another year left on his contract, and he wants that money. And I said to him, "Well, you got enough money, right?" He's like, "It's the principal." All right, Jim, it's the principal. So God bless him. Figuring that out. He's going to do some ambassador work for the school. He can certainly help to raise a lot of money. He's still got to do a radio show, so he's got some radio obligations there. And I think he'll do a great job for the school. I mean, he's certainly a huge asset in terms of raising money. It just shouldn't have gone down like that. I mean, he should have answered. He should have known the question was coming. Like, okay, after you lose your last game, they're going to ask you if you're retiring. What's the answer? And the answer should be, you know what, we just lost. The season's over. I'm 77. I'm going to take some time. I want to think about it. And I just, I'm not there. I mean, I'd like to, whatever to say. And then it goes away. But he didn't do that. And so he forced their hand. and they showed their hand, and it was not pretty, but like I say, I think they ended up in the right place, and I think that he'll be around and he'll be helping out, and he's still, meant a lot to that program in that city. And in time, I think people will forget the way that it ended and celebrate what happened up to that point.
And then, before I just return to the brackets and then send you on your Monday, Seth Davis, the shooting in Alabama with the Crimson Tide program being involved, and Brandon Miller, who is as terrific as they come in college basketball, part of the reason why Alabama is a 1 seed, I think is going to, certainly if Alabama starts making it to the Sweet 16 and the Final Four, it's going to wind up in more places than just columns or on the internet or the top of news stacks. I mean, it's gonna go throughout the entire country with news stations getting interested. How do you think this plays out, Seth?
Well, I think it's going to play out exactly the way that you described, because they're the best team in the country. Now, the best team doesn't always win, but the thing that I really look for, first of all, who's got the highest ceiling? If everybody plays as well as they can possibly play, who wins? The answer is Alabama. And the other question is, who can beat a really good team when they're playing poorly, especially shooting poorly? And it's a very short list, and at the top of that list is Alabama because of the way that they defend, their ability to get to the foul line, and their ability to get to the glass, offensive and defensive. And they have a true alpha, really the most talented player in the country in Brandon Miller, who, when nothing else is working, you just give him the ball, get out of his way. That's the basketball side. What you just described is, I think, what's exactly going to happen. And it's unfortunate and it's awkward, but we're keeping in perspective. It's a lot less unfortunate than what happened to this young mother whose life was absolutely senselessly and violently taken away. We should never forget what this is really about. In terms of the basketball piece, and in terms of Alabama's handling of the situation, did they do everything perfectly? No. Did they do everything the way I would have done? No. I definitely believe that he should have sat a couple of games, as well as Jaden Bradley, because they were both there. I can only tell you, Rich, I've dug deep into this thing, and I've talked to people in the know, on background, on the record, all of it. It is very complicated. First of all, he has not only not been charged, but they said right away he is not just a witness, a cooperating witness. So that was the first thing that Alabama knew. And then also Alabama knew that he was there and his role in this, but the public didn't know. And they are very hands-off on this because, rightly so, they don't want to be seen as, or in effect interfering with a murder investigation. So they're like, hey, man, we ain't touching this thing. Like, whatever law enforcement, we're not interviewing players, we're not digging for information. So they were in an awkward spot about not putting out that information. Once it came out and they were kind of learning things through the courts the way the public was, they have to make these decisions. Again, I would have sat him, but, it's very hard to get to the point where you say, well, he should have been kicked off the team for somebody who hasn't been charged and is a cooperating witness. Say, okay, well, he's not kicked off the team, but he should sit for a couple of games. Fine. That's what I think. But whenever he got back to the court, you would have that same wave of criticism saying he shouldn't be playing at all. Why did he only sit 2? And then if you take his whole season away, there's a whole wave of criticism saying you're not being fair to the kid. You're opening yourself up to legal liability from him and his camp about damage to his career. So it's an awful situation, and it's a tough situation. And I think I'm glad you asked me about it, because I think I would only hope that however people feel, they would first acknowledge the complexities of actually having to make these decisions. And then also, let's just stick with the facts. Like, as long as we're factual, then I think reasonable people can disagree.
Seth Davis, I appreciate the time. When it's all said and done, who's cutting down nets? What do you got it for me?
I got the Tide. I got the Tide beating Kansas, and I got Marquette and Texas, my Final Four. And as usual, any similarities between those predictions and actual events is strictly coincidental and highly unlikely given my my past record.
Okay, so Marquette, Texas, Alabama, and Kansas. Okay, so you got
and I got Arizona, Purdue, Houston, and Gonzaga in the Elite Eight. So a bit chalky there.
You're a bit chalky.
I got Alabama over Kansas on Monday night.
On Monday night, April 3rd. And then where can people get Wake Up with Purpose, what I've learned in my first 100 years, great title, by Sister Jean with Seth Davis, where all books are sold?
Books are sold. wherever books are sold. It's been a great ride. She's 103 years old. She goes to work every day. She's more mentally sharp than you and me and anybody that we know. She remembers everything. She's on top of the news. You know, we wrote a good book, Rich, but honestly, I made a great friend.
I love that. So you're already working on the next book, What I've Learned in the Last 3 Years, is what you're saying.
That's right. Yeah, I told her at the end of this we were going to give her a bat mitzvah. So that's what I'm working on. I'll send you a save the date.
Oh, it's like Mel Brooks and Carl Reiner, right? The 2013-year-old man. I remember that one for sure. Oh my gosh, Seth, thanks for the time. Thanks for the call. Let's chat during the tournament afterwards and down the line. Appreciate the time, sir.
Anytime, Rich. Always happy to talk to you.
Right back at you at Seth Davis Hoops. You should follow him. I do as well. Check him out on CBS and Turner's coverage of the NCAA men's tournament that starts this week. Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.